Hi everyone, my name is Robin Kerber and I'm the Farm and Seed to School Coordinator here at the Maine Child Nutrition Program with the Department of Education. And today I'm going to be demonstrating how to make one of our Harvest of the Month recipes for roasted root vegetable hash. And this is a really great one to make for most of the school, pretty much any time from fall, where a lot of these root vegetables are harvested from the fields, all through the winter. They usually last in storage, depending on what they are, for quite a few months. So we have a great selection of local root vegetables here. We've got our carrots, which are super sweet, and actually a lot of farmers will harvest their carrots after the first couple of frosts in the fall because a lot of the starches will convert to sugars with that freeze, and they're extra sweet. We've got some potatoes, of course, from Aroostook County. We've got a rutabaga. We've got a jicama. This is not local, but I wanted to kind of throw that into the mix. We've got a celeriac, which is a root vegetable that really just tastes strongly of celery. It's a really good one to mix in with like mashed potatoes. It adds a nice like sort of salty flavor. We've got a turnip, a sweet potato, and then some beets. And really this recipe just involves cutting everything up into the same size pieces because we're going to roast everything together in the oven with some oil and some onion and some spices and herbs. And if everything is mostly the same size, it's going to cook at mostly the same time. So we're not going to worry too much about the beets cooking faster than the carrots or anything like that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how to cut some of these, and I have washed everything, so I'm just going to peel what I need to peel. So I'm going to start by doing our carrots, and I've washed everything like I said, but I do want to peel some of these, including the carrots. So just a nice peel down. Root vegetables are great because for the most part they have pretty high yield. You're not tossing a lot. And I've scaled down the recipe to demonstrate for you guys today. So I'm looking for about 10 ounces of each kind of vegetable. So this is going to be about 10 ounces here. And I'm just going to chop off both ends and then make them more manageable. I always like to take my, your rolling vegetables like that can be potentially dangerous when you're cutting them, so I always like to give myself a flat surface. So I cut lengthwise, and for the bigger guys, I'm going to quarter. For the thinner carrots, just half is fine. And this would be a fun one too. Sometimes you'll see, especially if you're buying directly from the farmer, they'll have rainbow carrots. So you can get like purple and red and yellow and all different shades of orange. And this hash would be a really great use for that. You already have a ton of different colors coming in from the other vegetables, but this can be a very, very colorful dish. And I'm just going to throw those right onto the pan. I've got my little bin here for compost. So we've got our carrots, and then next up we're going to do our rutabaga. So the rutabaga, when you buy these, they have a waxy coating on them, so you really have to peel. Like there's no way around that. They pretty much wax them as soon as they have dried and cured after harvesting, and that extends the shelf life pretty significantly. So you could even peel off with your fingernail. It's a pretty thick layer. So the peeler might not be your best tool. I really like to go in with a sharp chef knife to make sure we're getting all that wax off. So I'm going to kind of flatten both ends. And this I'm not going to compost just because of that wax layer. I think it is food grade, obviously, but I prefer to not put that in my compost. All right, so cut it in half. And then just go in and very carefully, this is not a race, you're going to take your chef knife and just peel off that skin and that wax. And you're going to lose a decent amount of yield here. There's no way around that. I'm just going to use half of our rutabaga here. So I'm looking at like 1/2-inch dice. So go down, cut some 1/2-inch pieces here. Rutabaga is very dense. Be really careful as you're cutting it to make sure before you really push down that that knife is secure in the vegetable. You're not slipping. And then 1/2-inch sticks. And then finally going in, doing your 1/2-inch dice. Once again, these are going to be about the same size as your carrot, so they cook at the same time. All right, so that's our rutabaga. And then let's do some beets. So I got these beets, and they came with the greens on. And the greens are really great, super dense in nutrients. You know, that classic idea that the darker the green, the healthier. And then you've got this beautiful, deep purple beet that we're going to use. So we're just going to put the greens aside and use those for something else. Clean up both ends. And the beets are definitely something that you could go either way. You could keep the skin on, or you could take it off. You know, root vegetable, the idea of a root vegetable is growing underground, and so it's growing up against that dirt. You really want to make sure that if you're not peeling it, that you are cleaning it super well, and maybe even scrubbing it with a sponge to make sure all that dirt is removed. But I'm just going to go in with a peeler. I like to hold it in my hand and kind of like rotate it, circular motion, peeling off just a thin layer. You know, beets are something that, like, even grown-ups sometimes think they taste like dirt, and they just don't like beets. So if you're introducing a recipe to some school kids with beets in them, you know, maybe go light on the beets at first, or maybe do like a recipe with like some taste testing with the beets to kind of introduce them slowly, because they are pretty strong compared to some of these other root vegetables. They have a pretty strong flavor that can be a little bit off-putting if you're not used to it. But in something like this hash, like, it's surrounded by so many other ingredients and flavors that it's not too overwhelming. That's pretty good. So we're just going to clear off our cutting board here. Give this some space to work. Careful to not touch myself right now because I've got very highly staining beet juice on my hands. And then we're just going to do, once again, that 1/2-inch dice. All right, so we have our beets. Throw those right in. And now let's talk about the jicama. So a jicama, you're not really going to find that grown around here. It's pretty popular in Central and South American cuisine in the Caribbeans. You know, you often see it raw as like a slaw. Jicama slaw is probably like the most popular recipe that's going to pop up if you just do an internet search. I'm, of course, staining it now with my beet hands, but it's a very crisp vegetable. It's almost like an apple. Very crisp and watery, which kind of adds like a different, unique texture to all of these roasted root vegetables. And it's pretty bland tasting. It's really going to taste like whatever you season it with. Great, so just take off the skin. I'm going to just use half of this. So this is a really great recipe because it calls for equal parts of everything. But if you have like an abundance of potatoes or sweet potatoes or carrots, you know, you can really mix up those ratios to use up whatever you have in stock. Or if you get like a sale from a local farmer, they've got a ton of beets and turnips, like you can certainly just do a beet and turnip hash. The one that I'm doing right now, just using all of these different kinds of root vegetables is great because it'll expose the kids to a larger variety, but whatever you have on hand is fine. So I'm just doing a potato. Just like a standard all-purpose baking potato. We've got our celeriac up next. Once again, like most things we're doing here, you're just going to want to cut off both ends first. And then this one, it does have a lot of like gnarly roots and knobs all over it. So you can try your peeler, but I'm going to cut down the sides like that. This is like the same way that I peel a pineapple. If you do it this way too, it's the same idea. Just kind of like long slices, rolling around. And it just smells like so strongly of celery. That's good. And you'll often see when you cut into a celeriac that there can be some sort of like air pockets, and it can be a little bit funky inside. Funky as in like it's not going to be solid all the way through. That's perfectly fine unless you see like mold or obvious rot or some pretty severe discoloring. That's just that's naturally what it does. All right, so our celeriac in the mix. Let's grab our turnip here, cut off the stem end and the root end. This one I'm going to try with peeler. Yep, it's pretty easy with the peeler. It's just the thin skin you're removing. You could keep the skin on this one too. It'll cook down and not be tough at all. You'd get that pretty purple color, but I'm just going to peel it. Just going to use half. Last but not least, we've got our sweet potato. Sweet potatoes, I have never seen a Maine-grown sweet potato. When I worked at a farm in Pennsylvania, we grew them, but they're definitely more of a mid-Atlantic and further south kind of vegetable. But they're pretty cool. They grow on these vines. So when you plant them, or when you grow them, you actually buy these vines with these tiny little rootstock, and that's how you start your sweet potato plants. So it's kind of unique. And unlike a potato, if you're planting potatoes, you essentially get a bag of potatoes that have all started to bud and sprout out. So sweet potatoes and potatoes are pretty different. I'm just going to do maybe half of this guy. This way. I think sweet potatoes are becoming more popular, so kids recognize them, and maybe if they see a dish and they recognize like the sweet potatoes and the potatoes, they're more likely to try it and not question the other, root vegetables next to the sweet potatoes and the potatoes if they don't know what they are. So it's kind of like a good gateway vegetable. All right. That is the prep. So we've got all of our root vegetables diced up here. I'm going to mix them around. Beautiful. And then we've got our spices. So we've got coriander, cumin, onion powder, paprika, garlic powder, some salt. Shake that on. Mix it in. That's kind of like a pretty classic standard blend. You can definitely put in other spices or herbs that you want. A little bit of cinnamon would be super good in this. Nothing too crazy. And then we've got our oil. So I'm just using a standard vegetable oil here. Vegetable oil, olive oil, doesn't really matter. There's also this Maine-grown sunflower oil. The sunflowers are grown up in Blaine, Maine, which is up in the county. So that's a uniquely local ingredient that you could really do minus the spices in this recipe. This could be a nearly 100% Maine sourced dish, which is pretty cool. So I'm just going to finish mixing this up with my hands, and then we've got our oven that's preheated 425 convection. Going to throw it in there, check on it after about 15 minutes, give everybody a stir, and then we'll see how much longer. All right, so I just took our roasted root vegetable hash out of the oven. It is done. It cooked in a lot less time than the recipe said, so definitely keep an eye on it. You know your ovens. You know if they're maybe running a little bit hotter or colder. But right now, everybody is done cooking. I can bite into all the different kinds of vegetables here, and they're all going to be nice and tender. And this is a really great recipe to serve, on a hot line. You could put it into a breakfast burrito. You could serve it really with like any dishes aside. It's incredibly versatile. It's beautiful. We've got all these bright, vibrant colors from the root vegetables, and I encourage you to try it.